Today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about a really interesting new AI company called Skyfire. And, we've talked a lot on the podcast in the past about AI agents, where they're going. And today there is a very interesting development with a company called Skyfire. Now, as you'll notice, Connor is not on the podcast today. He is on vacation, enjoying himself and some well deserved rest after he has launched a million projects you've seen lately. Hardworking guy. So I decided to bring you a couple podcasts solo because there was some really interesting breaking news and I didn't want you to miss out on it. So let's get into it. Today's company Skyfire. The reason I want to bring this up is super interesting. Essentially, what this is, it's out of San Francisco. They just raised $8.5 million in their seed round, so a ton of money for a very new company, and they're essentially calling themselves the Visa for AI. And what they really mean by this is it's such a fascinating concept. When you think about all of the new problems and everything that is going to be coming down the pipe in the future with AI agents and kind of where AI is going in the future, you start to think of new problems we haven't had before. And the one that they're solving is essentially, how will these AI agents that we might have or hire or use or own, how will they make payments for things? Like, on the one hand, at first I was like, how is this a company? You just have some sort of API tied to your credit card, and then you just tell your agent, it can go and spend money on certain things. I don't know. Well, it's not quite that simple in reality, right? Because agent programs, a lot of these things, they don't want to mess around with payment processing. If it's an open source code, they don't want to mess around with it. They don't want to be liable. And so it's going to fall on third parties like this new Skyfire company. And essentially what it does is it is building an API, and it's building the technology that if you have an agent, two scenarios that I can think of. One, it's an employee in your company, essentially, right? It's like what's working on things in your company. Usually employees in the company, it's like, oh, hey, like maybe they're running your social media and they're like, oh, hey, like I've been running the social media. We're hitting a limit with our social media scheduling software. I need to upgrade to a different one. It costs, $40 a month. Can I get it? And then you give like your company card or some sort of authorization to the employee, or an employee card, and they go and kind of like buy that thing or whatever software tools they need, right? Like, this is how a normal company works. We're going to need the same thing for these AI agents. And the question is, like, how exactly will that work? And it's one thing if, you wanted to run this in maybe a smaller sense where the agent has to make a request and then you have to go on and sign up for an account and give it access to the account. And then, it can move forward and you go do all the payments. But if you really want a hands-off approach to these agents, which is kind of what they're billed as, right? The whole point is that you're not having to go in there and make a bunch of like manual decisions and do things for it. It'd be really awesome if that agent was just able to go and completely autonomously make payments for things that it needs to buy. And so that's what this new software is going to do. It's got a bunch of really cool features. What I'm most excited about, number one, they say it has an open global payments protocol. So essentially, this is going to let these AI agents access LLMs, data sets, 8 different API services without having any sort of need for payment methods, subscriptions, credit cards, that kind of thing. So it's got a bunch of tools that you can imagine, like it can get access to OpenAI or Llama or Anthropic, or like a lot of those like AI tools, and even data sets with really interesting data. It gets access to all of those things that normally you have to pay for. So instead of you having to go and like sign up for like an OpenAI account for every single one of your agents, hooking up with this software, I mean, you'll probably have to pay for it one way or another, but it removes that hassle. They kind of have that built in. So that's nice. The thing that I think is the real reason why this should exist at all, that, this is the justification for this whole company existing, is automated budgets and budget controls. This is something that I think is really huge. And essentially what you're going to be able to do is give each agent that might have a specific task a budget. Like, okay, your job is to go and grow our social media, followings the biggest possible. Your budget is $500 a month. Use whatever tools you think you need within that sort of budget. Or, your job is to go and fulfill all of our order requests. Typically, we spend X amount on these different things. This is your budget to go and fulfill those order requests. Or your job is to be a customer service agent, right? So depending on what their job is, you give them different budget controls. And this is how we run companies. Every department always has budgets, and it's kind of always broken down. And, sometimes it's like, oh, I really want this tool, but it's not really in the budget. And okay, so we just like can't get it, or we got to get rid of something else in order to get it, right? These are the kind of things that businesses and departments have to think about. Agents should have to have the same sort of restrictions and limitations. And, because obviously a company cannot go over budget. And so if you have 100 AI agents, that's the other thing with this. It's like, I can see some people being like, oh, why do I need this? Like, I could just monitor everything my one agent's doing for the one project. It's like, yes, if it's like going to sort of augment you, but like let's say you have 100 or like 200 agents running around doing a bunch of different things. You don't want to get like, payment verification, setting up accounts, managing credit cards, managing like everything for all of them. Especially if they have like multiple transactions or microtransactions. I can think of like some people that do like e-commerce fulfillment, and they got to go and purchase like 100 of some sort of product, or maybe but they're different SKUs that they all have to be like different purchases, and it's very tedious. A lot of times they'll get a virtual assistant to do it, but if you're using an agent, you could completely automate that process, but the agent would need some sort of credit card, some sort of budget to go and complete that task. So I think this is really interesting. The other thing that it has is an agent ID and history verification. So every agent you have is going to be assigned an ID. You know which agent is spending how much money on what, and there's history verification. So you're going to be able to essentially make sure that everything that's been done, you can go back and track the history, how much was spent on every transaction. And that really, I think, gives a little extra layer of trust that it's not like, there's a credit card and it keeps on getting dinged and you're like, hey, which agent just spent on our company credit card? You're going to have one essentially for every single agent. Everything's broken down. I think this is really cool. The other thing they have is a verification service. So it includes a service for agent developers and businesses that essentially will let users have visibility and control over different network connections. It's going to help make everything trustworthy. The ecosystem is going to be really well. And then as far as like how this is going to work, you're going to be able to, the other problem is like an agent is not a person. They can't have a bank account or even a credit card per se. So um, so there's like all of those kind of like traditional banking problems that come along with them. And I've heard something that I think is interesting in regards to this is that I believe there was a case, or maybe someone was speculating about this, so don't quote me on this and do your own research, but I believe, or I swear I heard about a case where someone had an agent running around and trying to do something like go make money online, and it went and purchased some sort of illegal drugs or something online, and the person was approached by the police, and they were like, no, really, I had like an AI agent, and he showed them the code and it ran through and it like did this. It's like, I'm sorry, whatever. And I like I believe it was like a sting operation, and they bought like acid or something on the dark web. The agent did, and it got shipped to his house or something. I don't know. Also, I mean, that sounded like such a sketchy story. Like, was that really an AI agent, or I don't know. Anyways, so I'm not going to comment on the story, but this is a massive problem. If your agent does something crazy like that, first of all, we probably should have safeguards in place, and so agents aren't doing those kind of things. But regardless, it's like you don't really want a person to be blamed for it. So if there really was a way to segment out every agent having their own accounts, every agent having their own budgets, any sort of weird things like that, and it's not going to be blamed on the main, presumably the owner of the business. That's an interesting thing. Probably not a lot of people are thinking about it, but I just think that there's all of these new problems that are arising from these agents and kind of autonomously going around and doing things online that really there's new problems and they need to be solved. And so, yeah, this is, I think, a really interesting company that's going to be focusing on this. Skyfire is one I would keep an eye out for, and I'll keep you updated on how this goes in the future. I also wanted to let you know that I have recently launched a podcasting course. A lot of people have asked me with this podcast, AI Applied, and my other main podcast, AI Hustle, AI Chat, my other podcasts, like how to essentially start and grow a podcast. I tell people all the time, I believe this is the number one way to stand out in your niche, in your industry, in your audience, is to have a podcast and have a way to network with really incredible people, bring amazing people on your show, and grow your audience and your network and your business profile that way. And so I've created a course that breaks down everything I have learned, all of the mistakes I have made over the last 5 years, and there are many, many of those mistakes, in an effort that if you're interested in starting a podcast, you can avoid all of them, and you can go from either complete beginner to launch and a successful podcast, or if you already have a podcast, how to actually scale that up and get millions of downloads, as I've been able to do over 4 million downloads organically on my podcasts. Whatever level you're at a podcast, I'm going to take it to the next level with this course. So link is in the description. If you're interested in this podcast course, I would love for you to check it out. Really appreciate all the support. As always, hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day.